Alright, so to orient you guys in the geography over here, that giant dome over there, that white dome, that's the Pennsylvania Memorial. That's smack dab in the middle of Cemetery Ridge. To its right, you can see behind some trees a blue water tower. That's Cemetery Hill. That's going to be the main nucleus of General Meade's line. Now, that tree line behind me, if you see there's 3 barns back there in a row. Behind those barns is going to be a tree line that's going to run all the way up from the town all the way down. That is Seminary Ridge. That is the Confederate position. If you're a Union soldier, that might as well be death is what you're looking at. Now, if you count those red barns, you count to the 3rd red barn with white windows. A little bit in front of that's going to be a place called the Peach Orchard. It's going to be very important. So, we've covered their plans for both sides. Now, the Confederates are going to be on the march. Lee has his plan set in motion. It's 85 degrees on July 2nd. These men are in wool uniforms and they are marching all the way from near the town, down through Seminary Ridge, over to about this area over here. They're going to form up and prepare to flank the Union line. Now, a few things go wrong for either side here. On behalf of General Meade, you have a general by the name of Sickles. He's going to be a bit disillusioned. He doesn't really like Meade very much. He is not really much of a military man at all. He is a politician. That's how he gets his rank. Now, he's going to be scorned in a battle previous to this, Battle of Chancellorsville. He's going to occupy the high ground and be ordered to move from that high ground to a place of lower elevation. The Confederates subsequently are going to man that high ground and start shooting at his men. So he's going to keep that in his mind. Now, per General Meade's plan, General Sickles is going to occupy the land from Pennsylvania Memorial, a little bit closer to us from there, down into a trough in this little valley before it hits Little Round Top. So he sees that he's in a lower elevation than the rest of the line, and he does not like that. So without consulting anyone at all, he decides to move his 3rd Corps up to the Peach Orchard, which if you go to the Peach Orchard, you'll see it's right in front of Seminary Ridge. He has no idea that the Confederates are there, but he sees that it's a little bit taller than where he's at now, and that must be a good thing. So he knows he's doing something wrong because when he meets with General Meade in his headquarters and Meade is telling him his plans, General Sickles asks, "Can I move forward?" And Meade says, "No." And General Sickles, kind of like a child, goes, "Well, I'm a general, right? I have command of my troops. I can move my troops around for the most part." And General Meade goes, "Yeah, I reckon you can, as long as you are within the framework that I've given you." And Sickles goes, "Okay, how about I take someone from your staff to go, help me put my troops in position?" So he says, "Sure, take General Hunt, Chief of the Artillery for the Army of the Potomac." Well, they ride out, Hunt and Sickles, and Hunt takes note that, we're making a right turn and we're not supposed to, so I wonder what's going on. They ride out to the Peach Orchard. Hunt tells Sickles that he's way out of position, and in fact, by moving up so much and not telling anyone, he has left a massive gap between the Peach Orchard and the rest of Cemetery Ridge. So there is now a hole in the Union line that the Confederates can now exploit. Not to mention that Sickles he doesn't have a whole lot of men to cover this that he's created a salient. So his line is stretched so thin that he has to bring up the artillery and put them in a frontline position. And artillery is a little bit more squishy than an infantry regiment, so they don't want to be in direct fire. You don't want them in that position. But with Sickles, he needs everyone he can get, so they're manning the lines just like the infantry. Now, Sickles looks to Hunt and goes, "Well, I know that I'm out of position, but how about, since you're here, on your authority, you give me the order to stay here?" And Hunt, recognizing a disaster in the making, does not want the credit for that, so he goes, "I'm not going to give you my authority. I'm going to go back and tell General Meade what you've done." But, in perhaps the smartest decision that Sickles has made, perhaps ever, to be honest with you, Hunt says, "Send skirmishers out to the tree line just in front of you and see if there's any Confederates there." Hunt leaves. Sickles actually takes the advice from a military man, sends skirmishers out, and they report a mass of Confederate infantry just in that tree line. So Sickles is now in a really big bind. Meade orders Sickles up to his HQ, doesn't even get off of his horse. Meade orders him to stay on there, that he's going to go ride with him himself to see what he's just done. They ride all the way out to the peach orchard, and as they're riding out, General Meade does two very important things. One, he summons the 5th Corps up from under General Sykes to bring troops up from reserve and fill in any of the gaps that he's anticipating are going to arise from Sickles' mess up here. He's also going to dispatch a man by the name of General Gouverneur K. Warren, the statue behind me, to come look at Little Round Top here because he hears peppering happening on this hill. They get out to the peach orchard, and no sooner do they get out, the Confederates open fire and artillery rounds go over the heads of the Union troops, including Meade and Sickles themselves, at the peach orchard. And Sickles goes, "You think I should retreat?" And Meade goes, "Well, I wish you could, but I don't think they're going to let you." And he promises to support Sickles as much as he can by sending in as many troops as possible to help assist the 3rd Corps. Now, when Warren gets up here, there's only signalmen here with their flags. They're waving them around. They have reported Confederates moving in the tree line, but not down to the south, up to the north. Because as these Confederates are marching, they see a couple things. They see that, one, Sickles has moved Union troops into the peach orchard. They weren't there when they were planning this. So now they have to think about how they're going to deal with that. And Lee had been very impatient at this point. Longstreet had been very impatient. He does not want to be here at all. And General Hood, under Longstreet, asks, "Well, how about we go further and we can flank them?" And Longstreet says, "There's really no time for that, and I can tell you what Lee's answer is going to be to you. It's going to be no. So go ahead, strike through the peach orchard, follow the plan which would lead the Confederates directly into the middle of Cemetery Ridge where the Pennsylvania Monument is." However, Hood's division is going to drift to the right. So they're going to hook around and start coming towards the Valley of Death and Devil's Den while also attacking the peach orchard. They also see the signalmen up here. And the thought process is, we need to have the element of surprise, and if I can see them, they can see me. So they have to double back in 85-degree heat, march a few miles back, and ironically enough, that's when they get spotted by the signalmen. And that's why they report a mass of Confederate troops moving north. So they tell Warren this, and Warren, as soon as he gets up here, he hears the heavy cannonading happening over to his right at the peach orchard, and he hears gunshots happening over by the Slider Bushman farm way over there, because the 2nd U.S. Sharpshooters, acting as skirmishers, are delaying the Confederate advance. Now, by this time, Longstreet's corps is now moving from the woods and coming directly into this location. He's smashing into the troops at the peach orchard, and there is no one here. Warren immediately begins dispatching troops and runners to try and get anyone he can. And as he's in this moment, he hears something behind him. Now, when he turns around, he'll see the individuals that we will cover at our next stop. Alright, so when Warren turns around, he turns around to see the 6 guns of Lieutenant Hazlett's battery. They're going to be 10-pounders, and despite the name, they're going to be weighing about 1,100 pounds of gun and carriage and all. Now, this hill is very rocky, it's very steep. So these guns are coming up from behind you guys. They're using a logging road. You don't exactly know where that road is today, but even then, it's very steep and it's very treacherous to get them up here. So all of the horses are actually going to give out, all except the ones on driver Private Quinlan Sullivan's team. He's going to be the only gun that's going to get their cannon up here on horsepower alone. So he's not only asking everything from the men of his crew, but also through the horses themselves to work tenaciously to get these guns up here and into position. Now Warren's going to see this, and he's actually going to grab a spoke or two and help pull them up. And the troops that are pushing them are going to struggle and try not to slip and get run over by these 1,100-pound guns. Now when they get up here, Warren essentially asks them 2 questions. 1, how'd you get up here? 2, why are you here? Now he'll take anyone he can get because Warren believes that this battery is all he has, the only thing to defend this hill. However, these guns cannot depress their muzzles enough to rake fire down the hill. So they're effectively useless in defending the immediate hill. However, Hazlitt points out to him that 1, think of them as emotional support cannons. The sound of these guns will increase the morale of our troops and decrease the morale of the Confederates. Also, his guns can shoot into the wheat field, which is that little square patch right over there. They can shoot rounds over there. They might also be able to shoot rounds in the Devil's Den, that rock formation over to my right. Now, while they're setting up, the Confederates are still marching from Seminary Ridge over to here. They're also beginning to engage at the Devil's Den and a place called the Triangular Field, which is really a triangular field of death. Hard to see because it goes down immediately over the ridge of Devil's Den. Intense fighting is going to be happening there, also in Rose Woods, the immediate woods behind me. Now, Hazlitt is going to stand firm up here on horseback with his sword, waving them around, encouraging his men. His men are going to be shot at. In fact, one of the #1 men on the gun crew, they're going to wheel the cannon in position, take the bucket of water, put it on the ground. He's going to dip the sponge in it, and just before he's able to do so, a bullet's going to pierce the bucket and drain all the water out of it. So he's going to look at that, say something along the lines of "dang," and then rub the gun, put the round in it, and say, "Take this, darn you." So these men up here, along with the signalmen, were taking fire. The signalmen leave, but these artillerymen have to hold their position and stay here, much like Hazlitt. Unfortunately, the battle's going to calm down, and Hazlitt is going to be in the vicinity around the top of the hill, and his friend, General Meade, is going to bring reinforcements to this hill. Weed is going to be hit in the throat, and he's going to be paralyzed from the neck down by a Confederate sharpshooter around Devil's Den area. He's going to be laying on the ground. He's going to be whispering for his friend Hazlitt to come over so he can give him his final words. Lieutenant Hazlitt's going to run over. He's going to stoop down and barely hear what Weed's trying to say. And just as he's over his body, a shot rings out, and Hazlitt slumps over Weed. He had been killed instantly from another sharpshooter's bullet from Devil's Den. They're going to remove Hazlitt off of Weed's body. Weed's going to be distraught. He's going to die a few hours later. However, Hazlitt's impression was so great upon Warren that he recalled years after about how gallant and stoic this man was and what a true inspiration he was to not only the men but to himself. Now, unbeknownst to Warren, shots are going to ring out to the southwest of Little Round Top, and that's going to be further reinforcements that Warren has no idea are even here. Because again, he thinks that Hazlitt and his battery is all he has. So we'll cover the men that return fire to the Confederates at our next stop. In Little Round Top are going to be men from Colonel Strong Vincent's 44th New York. Now, they took a different route than the artillerymen did. That's why Warren did not see them. However, Vincent's going to ride ahead of his men and scout out the terrain to figure out where to place his brigade. So he's riding along with a few other soldiers, parts of his staff, and one of the men here is going to be Private Oliver Norton. He's going to be the standard bearer for the HQ flag for Vincent. Now, fighting is going to be happening at Devil's Den and Houck's Ridge. Also, the 2nd U.S. Sharpshooters are going to be delaying the Confederate advance at the base of Big Round Top over to my right. So he's going to see all this unfolding. He doesn't have a lot of time. However, this massive HQ flag is basically saying, I'm here and I'm very important. So a few shots are going to come towards Vincent. He's going to put 2 and 2 together and put Private Norton behind a rock somewhere just out of the way and away from him, more importantly, so he can do some recon in peace. Now, while he's also doing that, he's going to give him the reins of his horse and leave him be. He comes back and he notices something about Little Round Top. It's not a stereotypical hill that just goes up. It goes up, flattens out a little bit, goes up, and then flattens out a little bit, creating things called terraces. And that's where he's going to put his brigade. So the 16th Michigan is going to be his rightmost flank, which is going to be right behind me over here. You can see it's nice and flat. And the 20th Maine is going to be his far left flank, way over there. They're going to wrap around this hill. Now, you'll see it's very rocky to my left over here. Vincent sees that and goes, well, no one can go up that way. It's not possible to climb through these rocks, so I'm not going to waste men. You know, I don't have a whole lot, so I'm going to keep them along this terrace here in this ridge. And they're not going to just come over those rocks. So no one's going to be defending that side. Now the Texans and Alabamians are going to pour through the valley, and they're going to start launching wave after wave up this hill, and the Union are going to have to repulse them. Now I'm going to tell you a few individuals here just to give you the picture of how ferocious this fighting is. There's going to be a Confederate by the name of Private John Nelson of the 15th Alabama. He's going to have a bit of a reputation of being a brawler in camp. But you know, the darndest thing happens whenever the bullets start flying. He just disappears like a magician. So the captain, Captain Bethune, orders First Sergeant Patrick O'Connor to keep a hold of the boy and put him to work. Keep him there. And First Sergeant O'Connor takes his job very literally, and every time the Private Nelson, thinks about going back, the First Sergeant will go, grab him by the collar, haul him back up to the front, and keep him fighting there. This happens a few times until one time he's hauling the kid up, and he goes limp in his arms. He looks, and the kid had just been shot. He lets him go, crumples to the ground, and he says, "Now I guess you will not run away." Continues on as if nothing ever happened. Now, Union troops at this point, there's so much smoke they can't see anything. They can only see the muzzle flashes from the Confederates. They're crawling up this hill, wave after wave. And as they recede, like the tide, some are going to be stragglers and hide behind rocks waiting for the next Confederate wave so they could jump in. It's less to walk. So the Union troops are only able to shoot back at these muzzle flashes and just hope that they hit something. Now, in between these lulls in this fighting here, there's going to be a private by the name of Philip Grind, the 83rd Pennsylvania. He's going to be around about over here. During the lulls, he's going to notice a Confederate who's wounded out in no man's land. He's going to hop over their defenses. They weren't as great as these here, but they had a few rocks maybe that they could hide behind. He hauls this Confederate up, brings him up to the Union line, and gets him the medical attention behind the lines that he needs. He's going to do that once. He's going to do that twice. And then he's going to do it a third time. But by the third time, he is so exhausted and tired, other men from the 83rd Pennsylvania are going to be helping him get this wounded Confederate that they see. Now, just as they go over the wall, so to say, the Confederates launch their attack again, and his comrades have to leave Grind behind. After the battle, they go out and they find Grind, and he's with the Confederate that he tried to save. Both had been killed in the charge. Now, let's see here. Valerius Giles of the 5th Texas, he had fired his rifle so much the fouling had got so bad that he couldn't even stick the ramrod in all the way. He's trying to ram it up against the rocks and boulders to finally seat the round, and then he does get it seated, but he can't get the ramrod out. But that's not really a problem, because he just puts a percussion cap back on the rifle, yells "look out," and lets it fly, coincidentally clipping the ear of another Texan, which thankfully he was properly deaf at that point, so he couldn't hear a lot of the curse words that were uttered his way from the Texan. And then afterwards, he looked around and goes, "Well, you know, there's a lot of decently good rifles just strewn about on the ground. I probably should have taken one of those instead, but, you know, you live and you learn, I guess." At least he still had both ears. Now, eventually, the Texans are not going to be denied. They're going to flank around to the left, and they're going to go through these rocky boulders that Vincent is going to leave unguarded. They're going to hit the flank of the 16th Michigan, and amidst all the chaos and the smoke, you'll see the flag of the 16th Michigan waver a bit and then begin to fall back. The order went out to retreat. No one knows who gave it. The colors fall back. Other troops follow the colors. 16th Michigan is wavering. Colonel Vincent sees this happening. He takes his riding crop that was a gift from his wife. He runs up screaming, "Not 1 inch!" And then he's shot. Falls to the ground, mortally wounded, where he will die later on. Michiganers are falling back. Vincent's wounded. He's going to die. All hope seems lost as the Confederates are pouring over the 16th Michigan, driving a dagger straight into the heart of Vincent's brigade. To rush down the hill under Colonel Patrick O'Rourke. Warren, while looking for more troops, had found O'Rourke and his men at the base of Little Round Top. O'Rourke and Warren had served together. He knows that Warren is not prone to flights of fancy, disobeying orders, as he is to help the 3rd Corps in the wheat field. He follows Warren and gets directed up to Little Round Top. The men don't even have their guns loaded. They don't even have time to move from column formation into line formation before a battle. They just reach up the hill. O'Rourke sees the chaos, draws his sword, and leads a charge personally. Some of the men had reloaded en route. Others just have the bayonet or the stock of their rifle to use as a weapon. They rush over this hill. They smash into the Texans and draw them back into the Valley of Death. They also sweep up 16th Michigan and grab their stragglers, put them back in line. However, leading the charge comes at a heavy cost. Colonel O'Rourke, over the hill, a Confederate stands up and shoots him square in the throat, killing him instantly. And the Union troops that do have their weapons loaded are going to pour shot after shot into the Confederate that they believe killed their beloved colonel. However, the Confederates are pushed back. But they will not be denied, though, because these Confederates are a little bit different. These Confederates are from Hood's division, which by this point have earned the moniker of Lee's shock troops. If you have a line that needs to be broken, you send in the Texans. And for some reason, the Confederates have taken the field time and time again in the East against the Army of the Potomac. But this time it's different. This time they're holding on, and they don't know why. And it's almost out of spite that they keep rushing this hill. Now, on the side of the Union, things are also a little bit different. The majority of the men in the Army of the Potomac here are from Pennsylvania. This is their home. They will fight for every inch, and they're paying in blood. However, they cannot retreat. That is not a possibility, and it will not happen. Now, the attacks here are going to stall, and the Confederates are going to wrap around to the left of Vincent's flank, where we will cover their struggle at our next stop. Strike Vincent's left flank, held by the 20th Maine. But before we get to the 20th Maine, we'll cover the opposing side, 15th Alabama, and their commander. They are led by a man by the name of Colonel William Oates. Now, this man's going to be a bit of a brawler. He's going to love drinking and love fighting. Coincidentally, you can do both at bars. So before the war, he is going to basically go on a spree in his hometown of just getting drunk and fighting everyone he can, along with his brother John. Until one day, he's going to get into a fight, knock this guy out, and he's not going to get back out. He's not breathing, turning a little bit purple. Oates skips town, flees thinking that he's just killed this man. Now, he flees to Texas and doesn't say anything else. His brother remains back home, the man recovers, and he goes to find his brother and bring him back as his family misses him. Says, hey, this man that you thought you killed, he's alive, so you're not going to get charged with homicide. A few other charges, but we'll talk about that when you get back home. But I need to find you. So he goes to Texas, goes to Galveston, and wouldn't you know, stumbling out of the bar, his brother William finds him, brings him back. The only caveat is he can't go back to his home county, anywhere else in Alabama. Now he has to fight not only to rejoin his former life, but also go through school, passes the bar exam, becomes a lawyer. However, when this great civil war kicks off, do you think this man's going to sit idly by and watch it go past him? No, he's going to join. He's going to become an officer in the Confederate forces, leading the 15th Alabama. Now, the men of the 15th Alabama here are going to be pretty unlucky because they're going to have to march many miles to get to Seminary Ridge. They're not with the initial Confederate forces fighting on July 1st. They have to march and march and march in their wool uniforms. They have no water. They get to Seminary Ridge on July 2nd, and Oates is immediately left with a very important question. Do I dispatch about 20 to 30 of my men out of 499 to go get water? On the other hand, if I leave these men to go get water and the order to move out is given, I can't wait for them. So he decides eventually to detach these men, and these men have a bit of a trickier problem, even more so than a regular water detail, because the whole Confederate Army has been here July 1st. All the available water sources nearby have either been dried up or polluted, so they have to go even further to find this water, and they don't return. The order to march out is given, and Oates reluctantly has to order his men forward. Also, his brother John has rheumatism in his pelvis. He can barely walk. However, he does not want to be branded a coward. Oates grants them permission to use a horse to join this battle, and he reluctantly allows his brother, wounded as he is, to join in its assault upon the Union forces. Now, they move out, they encounter the 2nd U.S. Sharpshooters. Now, these guys are a bit of an elite unit. They're really good marksmen. They're also wearing green to denote their elite status. What do you see around you as you look around? A lot of green. So, these sharpshooters, they don't fight like a traditional infantry regiment. They're dispersed. They use cover. They bound from tree to wall to tree and bush. and they fall back whenever the Confederates advance. Now, they go back to the base of Big Round Top over to my left, and Oates is supposed to march into the valley, straight through by Plum Run at the base of Little Round Top and go straight towards Cemetery Ridge. However, these sharpshooters are putting shots into his regiment's side. Now again, do you think he's just going to move on forward and let them rake his side and his rear with shots? No, he's going to turn and face them. And he's not only going to turn a few companies to face these sharpshooters, he's going to turn his entire regiment to the right, still without any water, in 85-degree heat and wool, and charge these sharpshooters up Big Round Top. They're going to rush to the very top. They're going to lose these sharpshooters because they're wearing green, and they're going to collapse from exhaustion. Now, Oates is going to be there with his men, and a staff officer from the Confederates are going to ride up there with his horse. How he does that, I have no idea. He's going to find Oates, and Oates is going to be halfway delirious at this point because, again, no water, heat, very bad. And the staff officer is going to go over to Colonel Oates and go, "What are you doing here? Why are you here in the first place?" And Oates says, "Bear with me. Go back to General Lee. Tell him that if I have all the men and artillery that I want, I can make this into a veritable Gibraltar and fortify Big Round Top." And the staff officer says, "Colonel, your orders are to attack, not to defend. Get up and attack." So Oates has to go around to his men and physically haul them up off the ground, face them the direction he wants them to go, and point them to where he wants them to move because they're just so exhausted. While he's reassembling his men, one of his troops comes up to him and says, "Hey, I see a Union supply depot somewhere off in that direction. I think we should get it." So Oates is left with another question. Should he send more men off from his depleted regiment and attack this undefended supply depot or not? He decides to go after the supply depot because he's very thirsty. He doesn't have a whole lot of supplies. That might as well be the fountain of youth for him. So he sends men off there and then begins marching down Big Round Top. Unbeknownst to them, the 20th Maine is here and they're in position. Colonel Chamberlain is going to be leading the men of the 20th Maine, and he's going to send out a company to scout the area in front of him. They go up into the Big Round Top, they run into these sharpshooters, and they essentially say, "If you know what's good for you, you're going to follow us because there's a lot of Confederates up there coming right down here." And they hunker down behind a wall in that direction, guarding the Union supply depot that the Confederates are going to try and take. Now, the Confederates are going to rush down. The fire from the 20th Maine is going to be so withering that the Confederates are going to stagger as if in a strong headwind. Now, they're going to launch wave after wave, and as they come across Chamberlain's front, they're going to try and wrap around his flank. So Chamberlain's going to have to do something called refusing his line. So it's going to take it from a nice line, bend it back like a V. And the tip of that V is going to be that cube off to my right, the 20th Maine marker. Now, in that tip is going to be the color bearer of the 20th Maine, and by the name of Andrew Tozier. He's going to be a sergeant, formerly 2nd Maine, and the 2nd Mainers don't really want to be there. Essentially, 2nd Maine formed, more men got added later on, and those men that were added later were told, when the whole regiment musters out, you can leave. We don't have to keep you here the entire time. Well, surprise, surprise, the government goes back on its word. Who would have thought? And the 2nd Maine is incorporated to the 20th. Colonel Chamberlain sees this man, very tall, 2nd Maine. If I give him the most prestigious spot in the regiment, the color bearer, that'll foster unity and cohesion. Now, Tozier's going to do something very uncommon for a color bearer. In that corner, he's going to be holding the flag in his arm and firing his rifle with his other arm. On the other side, you have the 15th Alabama's color bearer. Amidst these charges, one of the Union soldiers is going to rush towards the color bearer and reach for the flag. The 15th Alabama color bearer is going to step back, and none other than Sergeant Patrick O'Connor is going to come around from the back and spear the Union soldier through the head with his bayonet. Elsewhere, you have Sergeant Charles Steele, the 20th Maine, shot in the chest, goes over to his captain, says, "I am going, Captain," before collapsing, weltering in his blood. Colonel Oates is going to urge his men forward. Captain James Ellison is going to cup his hands to his ears because he cannot hear him over the ring of gunfire. and cannot understand him due to smoke everywhere. And as he leans in closer to his colonel, he's going to be shot, fall backwards, spasm out, and then fall to the ground dead. That's going to greatly traumatize Oates. Oates is also going to be on a rock with his pistol shooting towards the 20th Maine when a private is going to jump up next to him, a private by the name of William Holloway. He'll say, "Colonel, I can't see them." Colonel Oates is going to urge him to steep down below the smoke and return fire, and he does so. However, a few moments later, he's going to be shot in the head and fall backwards. Oates is going to reach over and grab his body, lay him down gently before picking up his rifle and returning a few shots in anger to avenge his fallen private. Now, after repeated assaults, the Confederates are going to be low on ammunition. They're still very thirsty. Men are dropping left and right from heat exhaustion. At times, Colonel Chamberlain's line is going to dissolve. He's going to turn around and he's going to see blue and gray locked in a melee, and he has no idea where his line begins and where it ends, or even if he has a line anymore. Now, both men are left with a decision. Colonel Chamberlain and Colonel Oates are low on ammo. They don't have a lot of supplies, and for the Union, they can't retreat. If they retreat any further, they're going to expose Vincent's right flank and leave this hill for the Confederates. Colonel Oates is thinking about his situation. Unbeknownst to him, his brother John is bleeding out and he will die on this battlefield here. At the same time as Colonel Chamberlain orders to fix bayonets and allegedly orders a charge, Colonel Oates is going to order a retreat. Now when the 20th Maine charges down the hill, the Alabamians move the other way, creates a perfect route where they are pushed off from the battlefield. They are charged back up Big Round Top as if their plight wasn't bad enough. Colonel Oates himself is actually going to collapse from heat exhaustion and be dragged away by two of his men to the capture. They're going to rejoin with the Confederates at the base of Big Round Top. They're going to camp there, and the 20th Maine is going to dissolve for a little bit. At that point, Colonel Chamberlain has no command over them. They are just as tired as the Confederates, and they are very ticked off, so they're going to run up Big Round Top before coming back and then forming back into line. Now, after intense fighting, the Union will hold Little Round Top. However, pot shots still ring out from Devil's Den that the Confederates have. Also, Houck's Ridge is contested, along with the wheat field. The Confederates will also take the Peach Orchard, and they will briefly pierce the Union line on Cemetery Ridge. Now, with the Alabamians gone at the base of Big Round Top, the fighting really calms. It's unnerving to read the accounts. A Colonel Powell of the 5th Texas was left behind on the face of Little Round Top where he just came from, and he's going to notice a sergeant from the same unit is going to calmly walk down the hill, notice a ramrod leaning against the rock, pick it up and analyze it for a few seconds before calmly walking back into the tree lines, unharassed at all. Now, Union troops will reinforce this hill under General Meade. He, of course, will pay the ultimate sacrifice along with many other Union troops and officers here. When all is said and done, 565 Union troops become casualties, and the number for the Confederates is 620. We've seen tenacity on both sides today, from marching in 85-degree heat to charging this defended hill 3 times over there, 5 times over here with no water, and largely leaderless on behalf of the Confederacy. Their leadership suffers greatly, not only from wounds and gunshots, but just from the heat and becoming heat casualties. Now, both sides had their motivations, and both paid dearly to achieve the outcome that they wanted. Despite heavy losses on either side, another day of fighting remains on July 3rd, and July 2nd, the fighting isn't over yet. Over at Culp's Hill, the fighting begins nearly at night, and that'll be some of the most fierce fighting here as well at Gettysburg. In short, never forget the grit and tenacity exemplified by men on either side on July 2nd, 1863. As you walk around amidst the spoils of their sacrifice, I truly urge you to enjoy your day here at Gettysburg and think of what price they paid here. And I thank you for spending your time with us. Greatly appreciate it. And I hope you come back later on. Thanks.
Thank you for watching our video. Please remember to like, share, leave a comment, and subscribe. It really helps us grow the channel. Also, if you're looking for more history-related content, then we invite you to head over to our website, americasbesthistory.com.